Hi everyone, my name is Roy Osharov and I work at Typemock. You can read my blog at iSerializable.com. Today I'm going to show you a very simple introduction to using Typemock to break some dependencies and work against static methods. Now I'm going to show two different demos. The first one is going to be using one type of syntax that's possible with Typemock. The other is with another syntax called natural mocks. So stay tuned for both of these because they have major differences. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to show you how you can break a constructor dependency in your existing code. To do that, I'm going to show you this very simple API diagram. The class that we want to test is called action handler. And the action handler actually holds an instance of the config class, which is this one. Now the config class, in its own constructor, tries to load a connection string from a configuration XML section in the config file. Obviously in our unit test this does not exist, or we don't want it to exist. So I'm going to show how you can actually create an instance of action handler even though inside it tries to create, inside this constructor, it tries to create a config class. Now let's go to the constructor of action handler class and we'll see that it actually creates it here. Now suppose we don't want to use dependency injection, or we cannot change this code because someone else wrote it. Let's try to write our first test. So this is going to be in a class called action handler tests, and I'm going to use some snippets from ReSharper that I've created. The first one is called test. Now a test has three parts in the name of it. The first is the method being tested. Now the method we want to test is called handle, which is part of the action handler class. And when handle is called with a string over 4 chars, it should call the logger. So let's see the API diagram again. The logger is a class with a static method called write. Now the action handler has a method called handle. When it takes an input, and if the input is larger than 3 chars, it should call the static method called logger write. I'm going to assume that the code isn't written yet. We just want to test it so that we can create this feature in a test-driven manner. So here's what we can do. First of all, let's see if we can even create an instance of action handler, which is one of the basic problems when you do legacy code testing. So if I write action handler and I try to new up an instance of it, and I run this test using the testdriven.net add-in, I should be getting an output that says object reference not set to an instance of an object. This is actually happening at myProduct.config constructor, which in turn is being called by the action handler constructor. So this is the code that actually throws the exception, and this is part of the config class here. And if we go back, this code is being called from the constructor of the action handler class. So what can we do? One of the things we can do using Typemock is we can mock out new instances, future instances of config class by going to our test and using the mock manager, which is part of Typemock. So I've already added the reference to the Typemock.net framework here for .NET 2.0. And what I do is basically like this: mock manager dot mock all type of config. This also has a generic method signature that you can use. That should be enough because it will also mock out the constructor of the config. So now action handler will create the config class, but nothing will happen inside of it. So let's just try to run this test again. And this time you can see the test is passed. We didn't do any asserts. But at least now we can actually create an instance of action handler. So now let's try and do the next test, and this is to expect a call against the static method of the logger. So how do we do this? First of all, let's see what happens when you just call the logger right now. So I say handler.handle with a string that's over 4 chars. And if I just run this test right now, we should be getting some sort of, well, nothing really happens. If I actually would have called the logger write method and run the test again,